name is Kay Byfield, and this is your ArtSpeaks Studio moment from ArtSpeaks Studio in Dallas, Texas. And today we're going to talk about design. The reason I want to talk about design is because CBS Sunday Mornings a couple of weeks ago did a focus on design, and I was really interested. I wanted to see how they were going to apply an understanding of design to the kinds of diverse topics that they usually handle. The interesting thing was they didn't ever define design. They presented stories about many different things, most of which I would agree were designed and are examples of good design, but they didn't actually call out any of the reasons why we would conclude that. Which all begs the question, what is design? Whenever you get on the internet and you look up that term, it is specific. Design is specific to a discipline. So design in art is described differently than design in engineering or design in curriculum development. They don't act like they're the same things, but yet we're using the same word, and I believe they're all related. So I looked at them all and I came up with what I think is a universal definition that can be broadly applied to any kind of design. So I think that good design results in a product, an object, an experience, a process that is aesthetic, efficient, understandable, and meets the original goals. In other words, if you want to design a house that's a ranch-style house where the master bedroom is separated from the other bedrooms and the intermediate space is well used and so forth, you've got these goals, then you design a house that meets those goals. Most project management websites describe the design process, the way that you arrive at a good design, as having 7 steps. I don't know that all 7 steps are required or would be managed in exactly the same way in other kinds of design processes, but the steps are very similar to one another. And I think that we can broadly define those as well in a way that would apply to any kind of design. So here are the steps as I would describe them for a general approach to the design process. The first one is determine what the goal is. If you don't know what the goal is, you're not going to have a good design. And not defining the goal is the cause of many failed designs. The next step is to establish the available resources and parameters. You need to know, what do you have available to use? What are your limitations? How much money do you have? How many people can be included? What materials are available? And then the design needs to take all of those factors into consideration. You need to then research and develop possible solutions. Come up with ways that you're going to approach this. And then you begin to test these, to evaluate and determine what the most promising solution would be. Then you experiment with the selected solution. You try to see if it's likely to be viable before you actually, the last step is execute the solution and then test it to see if it works the way you had in mind. If it doesn't, then you do refinements. You may have to start over, but you will have all those other steps out of the way, and so you will be very efficient in doing this. A good design will always be pleasing to the people who are using it or encountering it or are the audience for it, as in the case of an artwork. That's how you know that it's well designed. They might not be able to think about what went into the design, but they will recognize it as pleasing and meeting the needs that the designer had. So the elements of design change according to the discipline, but the principles of organization of those elements, which are the actual way the design comes together, change depending on what is being designed. So the design principles that I would submit that would be all-encompassing would be these. It needs to be cohesive. In other lists of the organizational principles of design, they might use the word harmony, they might use the word unity, but all designs need to be cohesive. They need to hang together. They need to look like they're all working together and they fit together. They need to have variety. There needs to be something to create some interest in it. But there also needs to be repetition, something that adds to that cohesion we already talked about. There also needs to be emphasis. Something needs to take precedent and lead you where you need to go in some way. And there has to be balance. It can be informal balance. It can be balance that doesn't look like balance, but everything needs to balance. If it's a three-dimensional object, it has to have balance in the terms of the way that it sits on a surface because of gravity. And if it's something else, an experience, a presentation, a musical composition, a piece of visual art that doesn't actually have weight, it still needs to have balance. Things need to feel like they all fit together in a cohesive way. So applying these principles of design will result in what has been created being logical and pleasing. So let's look at the stories that were on CBS Sunday Morning in terms of design and see whether they're cohesive, balanced, have repetition, variety, and emphasis. In the program, they talked about each of these different products and activities, presumably as examples of good design. But again, they didn't address why they were good designs for most of them, and they didn't even mention design in relation to many of them. My conclusion is that if this was a design episode, it wasn't very well designed, although I did enjoy all the different stories. The reason I say it wasn't well designed is that while it was varied and perhaps balanced, and there was contrast, it wasn't coherent, and it did not emphasize design as it said it should, since they gave it that theme. Design is very important in every undertaking, including making art. And I give a lot of time considering the design of my artworks and looking at the design of my students and trying to help them master the elements and principles of design. If you want to make good art, I suggest that you do the same. I think it will make a huge difference in your art production. So, until next time, I wish you happy painting.